There's an old saying amongst podcast producers and podcast strategists that launching a podcast is easy, but growing a podcast is difficult, or making a podcast is difficult. And if you go back in the archives to when the show was called Let's Blow This Up, I had Eric Johnson, the founder of Lightning Pod, and we talked for over an hour on a live stream about that very subject. And it couldn't be more true. Launching a podcast is something that anybody could do. You could listen to this episode and actually launch a podcast today. It wouldn't be great, but you could launch. But where you really make your bones and you really get the most from the podcast medium is how you grow and utilize that content over time. So let's talk about what you need to know to launch and grow your podcast in a much smarter way for your business. Hello, my name is Jason Sircone, and you have stumbled upon episode 106 of Podcasting Strategy Simplified. So yeah, launching a podcast is very simple. And let me take a step back. It's not simple if you do it right. There are a lot of moving parts. This is why I recommend working with somebody that's been doing it for years, because if you try to do it on your own, I guarantee you're going to miss things. And it's because you don't know what you don't know. You're just going to miss things because you don't even know the potential problem exists. I can go back to when I first started working with other people on their podcasts. I got a phone call, and at that time I was in the beer space. I had my own beer podcast, but I wasn't working with anybody. In fact, that wasn't even on my radar to help others with podcasting. But I got a call from one of my clients that I worked with on the beer level. I brought beer into his restaurants and his bars, and I had done some marketing work with him in the past. But he called me up and said, I'd like to start a podcast, but I really don't know what to do. And I know you have a podcast, so could you tell me a little bit about what I'm in for? And without thinking about it, I was on the level of, I want him to succeed. Clearly, this is cool. This is somebody that I know and I trust and I've worked with. I want them to start a good podcast and do well with it and get the most from it. So me saying this is easy and you just do a couple things here and you buy a microphone on Amazon and you plug it in and you sit down and start recording yourself and you've got a podcast, I wouldn't be doing him any justice. So I felt like I needed to tell him everything that he was in for. And that's what I did. And that ended up taking about 5 minutes of me listing off everything that he should be expecting, because I didn't want him to go into it blindly. I didn't want him to miss anything, but selfishly, I didn't want him to yell at me if he discovered something. And he said, why didn't you tell me about that? So I really took some time to detail the steps and let him know what he was in for. And when I got done, there was this 5-second pause on the phone, and he just said, shit, that's way more than I thought. And it just hit me right there that maybe this is something I can do. And I said in response, it is a lot, and I'd like to help you. Maybe there's a way that we can partner up and I can work on some of those issues or those items with you, because I've done it and I know how to do it. And we can get your show out, and you'd only have to worry about being the content guy. Just bring your stories and your tips to the mic and I'll take care of the rest. And he loved that idea. And that's where, one thing led to another, and I ended up working with him for over 100 episodes on that show. And it was great. And to me, it was one of those things I was like, wow, this is something that I really feel other people could use. And that was really the foundation of me building my podcasting business. Now, of course, like I said, I've been hosting my own shows. I had never really done anything officially, but after I worked with him, I started branching out and talking to others, and one thing led to another. And here we are with Bombtrack Media. I've coached a ton of people in regards to production and guesting and marketing and strategy, of course. Like, that's really where the bread and butter is today. Now I have a much more well-rounded perspective of what I can bring to the table. I look back on that time, and yeah, I told him a lot, but there were still things that I feel that we probably could have done a little bit differently. There was a couple things that I could have been even more adamant on in regards to his content strategy. That's neither here nor there. The point is that he could have just launched that podcast and never called me up. How many episodes would he have gotten through? I don't know. This is one of the things that you have to think about too. So in addition to not knowing what you don't know, you have to have the right mindset when you come into this. I haven't seen it lately, and I'm glad, but for months, and it's probably because I would sit there and grit my teeth as it came across my screen anytime I was on Facebook or Instagram, was some clown launching a 24-hour podcast launch course. And I would just watch this thing and be like, you son of a bitch, this is why there are so many podcasts out there that only have a few episodes, because people like you come along and you tell everybody how easy it is to launch the show. But where are you when it comes time to build upon that content, to make a good podcast, to build something over time that becomes a vehicle to support your marketing, to support your branding, to support the communication efforts that you have within your business? Fly-by-night bullshit like that is just that. It's fly-by-night for a reason. Yeah, launch your show and then I'm gone. Ugh, no. There's so much more value in having a mindset of a long-term plan and then figuring out how to build that long-term plan in your own vision, in this vision of what you want your company to be and how the podcast serves it, not the other way around. I talked about this on last week's episode. You have to reverse engineer what is very often common thought of, let's start a podcast and let it blow up our business. Like, no, look at your business first and then figure out how to plug podcasting into it. So I will say that the launch is a very fun and a very important moment in your podcast. But in a lot of ways, when you think about this, your launch is like planning the world's best wedding. For months and months, and I'm a divorced guy, so maybe I'm not the best one to be giving this advice, but I think the analogy is sound. You plan for months and months and months for the best possible wedding, and you're meticulous about every detail, and you want every little moment to just go perfectly, and you want every guest to feel the love in the room and just have this magical experience that they talk about for years, and a party that everybody can look back on with fondness and remember that time at that wedding, blah, 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 blah. But for the two people that you're there celebrating, that's just one day in what is supposed to be a lifelong journey. And if you're putting all your emphasis on what happens on that one day, but not thinking about building this long-term partnership that's supposed to evolve and bloom and grow more over time, we have terrible divorce rates because that's what happens. And again, I am no expert on this field, nor do I have any research. I honestly just thought of this analogy as you and I were sitting here talking. But it's true when you think about it, right? Like, if you are going into this with this grandiose plan of having a great launch, but you don't know what comes after the launch, you're going to fall flat. That makes the launch irrelevant. And I've said this before too. I guarantee every podcaster that's quit their show after 5 episodes, 10 episodes, whatever the number is, that wasn't their thinking in the beginning. Before they launched their show, they probably had grand plans, and maybe those grand plans had too much unrealistic expectations behind it. Like, oh, we're going to be Joe Rogan size and everybody's going to want to sponsor us and advertising revenue is going to flow through the bank account like Scrooge McDuck's big vault, whatever. Like, dating myself with that reference, but it's not the first time I've used that on this show either. So here we are. You have to think about what's going to happen over that long-term period. If you're just thinking about what happens in that first moment, you're going to lose track. And like I said, there's probably so many people that had this vision of doing way more than just a few episodes. But the real work begins when you get in the trenches, when you get into the actual content creation space of making a podcast. That's where you have to have a vision for what comes next. what's going to impact my audience. I need to have that one person that I'm speaking to, and I'm going to keep creating content for that one person until that one person turns to the other people that are just like them and says, you need to be listening to this too. That's when you can get the exponential growth to kick in with your show. But that doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't happen within 3 episodes. I've said this before, and I will say this again because it applies very much to a launch strategy. I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail momentarily, but think about where you are right now. You don't have a podcast, or maybe you do, but if you're thinking about maybe rebranding or restarting, or let's just, for conversation's sake, say that you are looking to bring podcasting into your strategies. Well, first of all, we have to figure out what that means, right? As I've said on past episodes, how do you use podcasting as a tool that supports your business? But what do you need to do to set yourself up to beat the statistics? And I don't think that's the number one priority, but the statistics say that 90% of podcasts don't make it to the 10th episode, which is mind fucking blowing to me. But I will say this: how do you beat that statistic? Record 11 episodes before you ever go live. If you have 11 episodes recorded, you've got content that's going to beat that statistic. So you're already ahead of the game. But also, saying it without my tongue in my cheek, you can set yourself up to give yourself a small break after that launch. Your launch can be more effective because you have more content to play with. Instead of giving your audience 1 episode when you launch, give them 3 or 4 or 5 and let them really sink their teeth into what you're doing with your show. You also then have a little bit of a window to where, okay, now I've looked at my first 10 or 11 episodes. Let's keep building from here. You keep yourself ahead of the game. If you're engaged in the content strategy, that's going to allow you to stay passionate about how you create that content. I can look at my list right now. I think I've got at least 15 of like these episodes where I'm coming at you on Thursday and just rapping one-on-one. At least 15 lined up for the next, 3.5 months. And then on the short episodes that I do on Mondays, the 5-minute questions, I've got, I think, close to 60 questions lined up. And that doesn't count. I'm going to throw this out there. I mean, I've been promoting it on the show to this point. This is still new, so I don't expect it to just take off, but you can go to SpeakPipe in the show notes. There's a link and you can send me your question. So I will add those questions to the mix as they come in too. So I've got content for the foreseeable future because that was the strategy I put in place. I knew where I wanted to go with this show when I rebranded it. And I'm not saying that I sat down and wrote it all out at once, but whenever ideas would come to me, being that they might branch off from an episode that I did this week, or it was something that I wanted to elaborate on from a past episode, or I saw somebody else talking about this, or it was a hot topic in the podcast space, I put all of these on my list so I can cover it on a future episode. So not only did I focus on launching this show well when it was called Let's Blow This Up, because I just dropped the whole season at once. That's how I launched the show. I was in season format. Here's everything that you need to hear. Binge the hell out of these 8 episodes and have a ball, man. That was my strategy at the time. I knew I was going to take a couple months off and then come back and do season 2. And I did a small pivot in there and did it as a live stream instead, but it still worked to where I was bringing weekly content for a full season's worth in that capacity. Moved to season 3. I took it another way. I was doing 3 episodes a week for 12 weeks with friends of mine, and I did 3 different formats. That was fun. Now I rebranded the show, and now I'm into 2 episodes a week. This is how I want to build my show. This isn't how you have to build your show, but you have to think about these things because you ultimately want to know, how is the time I put into building a podcast going to support my business? And if you're building a business, believe me, I feel this a lot of times. You've got a number of things on your plate, so you're not always thinking about podcasting. You're thinking about the other important priorities that you have to focus on to grow your business. And that's one of the big things when I started talking with business owners when I launched Bombtrack Media was, I want us to look at this from the standpoint of time. Can you realistically sit down and do an episode every week? And most people said, well, no, not really. I have X, Y. Yeah, you don't even have to tell me your to-do list. I know you're a business owner. You've got things to do. Can you batch record? Sure. Absolutely. But can you give me, let's say we work together, could you give me 1 or 2 days a month that we would record 3 or 4 episodes? Well, I could probably do that, but I know I'd have to figure. It's like I'm instantly I'm like, okay, you're already telling me that that's not going to be the easiest thing. It's not just like flipping a switch and saying, yep, let's start doing a podcast and I can be there every month. I can be there every week. That's why it's important to sit down and strategize from the reverse engineered angle of what do I want my business to do and where can podcasting plug into that? So now I'm using podcasting as a tool and I'm building content that supports my goal, it supports my mission, it supports where I want to go with everything that I'm building. So can you launch a podcast and do it easily? Yes. Should you? No. Put thought into it. And like I said, I want to break this down. I've done this on past episodes, so I'm not going to go into full detail. But I will say, to jump back in the archives, I have talked about full launch strategy on past episodes of this show. But the thing you want to think about with launching your podcast is before you go live, as I said, position yourself to beat the stats. And in doing that, you're going to put yourself in a spot to where you're getting some practice. You're getting comfortable on the microphone. You're putting in more reps and you have more content to play with. Then you can make small tweaks and adjustments and just keep getting better at what you're doing. But when that content goes live, now your audience really has something to get excited about. They have 5 fresh episodes that they can dig into. If you're providing them with value and you're giving them answers around your subject matter, around the things that you've built your business around, that's going to keep them locked in. That's going to get them rating and reviewing the show. That's going to get them sharing it through their social media or sending it via text to people in their circle. You're giving them more of a reason to be a fan of your show right out of the gates. That's the launch. That's important. You don't want to overlook this. You don't want to just throw out one episode and see what happens. And you especially don't want to go live if you've only recorded one episode, because this is one of the things that I don't have any scientific knowledge of this, but I have to believe that when people do that, let's launch this one episode and see what happens, it's a mind fucker, because they probably do that and then just go immediately to the download metrics the next day. And then they look at that number and not many people showed up for it. Or, maybe just, friends and family said, hey, listen to your show, it was great. But I can pretty much guarantee that whatever that number is, it's not big enough. I don't care what it is. If it was 100, it was supposed to be 200. If it was 200, it was supposed to be 500. Like, again, we put so much emphasis on a number that could not be more arbitrary. Because in reality, let's say you got 5 listeners, but maybe all 5 of them said, damn, this is good. I'm coming back. I can't wait for episode 2. Well, then if you never do episode 2 because you look at that 5 and say, what the hell? Where's everybody at? This is an old analogy that we've talked about here on the show. I love bringing it up because it makes complete sense. I know I talked about the whole, your podcast is a party. If you bring people in to that party and now they're there and they're looking to have a great time, but you as the host are looking at them going, I don't give a shit that you're here. Where's everybody else? And like, you're looking out your window or out your door, trying to see the other people that have no intention of coming because they don't even know about your party. You're giving the people that are there a lesser experience because you're caring more about the people that haven't come. I mean, how messed up is that? If you're doing that in your business is going to fail. You've got a certain amount of people that are demanding they have expectations and they're demanding a certain level of service from you, but you're lowering that level of service because you're looking at the people that haven't called you yet. That's backwards. So you apply that to podcasting and it's going to help you realize that having this entity in place is something that's going to continue to add valuable resources and valuable content and valuable experiences to your customers. And over time, their trust in you strengthens because you're giving them more reasons to trust you. You come to them every week or every other week, or maybe you're doing a season or a series, but you deliver them content in the way that they've come to expect it. And when they listen or watch you, they are now trusting you. They are now feeling that you are the person that's going to get them to the next level. When they are ready to make a buying decision, they think of you first because you've taken the time to connect with them consistently and give them the answers that they needed. And the guidance that you provided on your podcast, it maybe got them to a certain level of where they want to get to. But now they want to get over that hump, and you have a product or service that's going to help them do it. You're their first call. You're going to be the one that's at the front of their mind because you've taken time to lay out value each and every time you put content in front of them. That's how you grow a podcast. And that's the part that often gets overlooked. Too worried about launching, too worried about numbers flowing in because we launched, and then the growth aspect gets left behind. This is why I am a champion of thinking about all of these aspects when you build your strategy, so you have a long-term plan that allows you to see the path clearly in front of you, but also it keeps you engaged in the content that you're building. When you get to that level, that's when cool shit starts to happen. But if you bail out after a few episodes, you'll never know. And that happens far too often with podcasts. If you want to use this for your business, again, I'm not an advocate for saying you have to do it every week. I'm not saying that you have to do multiple episodes a week. I'm an advocate for saying, let's look at the business and see how we can use podcasting as a tool so it serves you, supports you, and ultimately pays you. And that can look differently for everyone as well. But you've got to get to this level to where the launch is just one piece, but it's an important piece. And then the consistent, continuous growth is where you're going to make your bones. Focus on that in the beginning and draw yourself out a clear roadmap. And that's going to put you in the right direction so you can experience all of these great benefits that you probably see people talking about a lot on the reels and all of the TikToks, where everybody's talking about how they've 10x'd everything because of their podcast. They probably have. I'm not calling anybody a liar, but they're not telling you how long that took. They are not saying that it took years of practice. They're not saying that it took years of just working on a craft and honing a message. You only see the shiny object at the end. But you have to be committed to growing something over time that's going to allow you to make one of those highlight reels. Forget how long it takes, because the time is arbitrary. You should be having fun with what you're doing, because this is a platform that allows you to talk about the shit you're passionate about. Look at me. I do this every week. And you know how passionate I am about podcasting strategy. I'm building a whole damn show around it, but I get to sit here with you every week and talk about it because I freaking love it. And I know how freaking important it is to your success. So I'm going to continue to build on this show and bring you fresh episodes every week that help point you in the right direction. Because I am fully confident that should you take the next step and you decide to get on a strategy call with me and we start looking at what we need to do together to get your business to the next level, to use podcasting as a tool to do it, I am 100% confident that you are going to be friggin' over the moon excited with the results that you get. But I know us working together is going to put you in that position, but I can't get you there until you have built that trust in me. Perhaps this is the first episode you've ever listened to. Maybe this is the 106th episode that you've listened to, and you've been with me since day one. Either way, regardless of where you're at right now, I am confident that one day you are going to be in a position to where you want to make that next step, and I'll be here to take that step with you. But think about this on a grander scale than just launching a show and seeing what happens and then forgetting all about the growth aspect. As I said at the top of the show, launching a podcast is easy. Despite how many moving pieces are involved, you could launch a show by the end of this day. The launch would probably suck, but you can do it. But where are you going to make your bones? Where are you really going to make an impact? It's understanding how to grow. These are the things that can get flushed out and planned out when you build an effective strategy. So my advice for you today, take the first step. Get on a strategy call with me. Let's start breaking this down and let's determine how this strategy is going to work for you. So go to jasonsircone.com/strategy call, book that call, and let's get to work. And with that, I'm going to bring the curtain down on episode 106 of Podcasting Strategy Simplified. I hope you had a great time. I know I did. Until our paths cross again on the next episode, my name is Jason Sircone, reminding you, podcasting isn't easy, but it doesn't need to be complicated. I'll see you next time.